What I want to talk to you today is basically on these three topics. I'm going to talk about gaming and esports growth. And you think, well, Frank, this is about the future of compute. Why are you telling me about gaming and esports? And I would submit there are certain categories of segments that push the envelope forward in terms of what computing has to do with. And then once it does, it starts to get adopted by almost every other segment. So there's some basic principles behind why gaming or things like autonomous driving or industrial IoT are really important things to look at in terms of the context of the future of compute. And of course, I'm the VP for gaming, so I'm going to talk about something I probably know better than other things. But that's the reason. It's not because it's all about gaming. It's because as I go through this and talk to you about business models and technologies, you're going to see how the future of compute's advancing both from a business perspective and a technology perspective. Then I'm going to talk about three trends that I believe are shaping that future inside of gaming and how it relates to other segments. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about a technology trend, some technology transformations that I see coming around the corner. So let me start with the gaming and the esports growth today. How many people are gamers? Raise your hand. Let me try different. How many people are not gamers? Liars. Liars. And the reason I say you're liars is because you assume when I said gaming, I meant like electronic gaming. Everyone games. Everyone. You play cards, you play dice, tiles. In fact, some of you may even play mind games, for all I know. But it's a fundamental human being thing to play games. It's how we test each other. It's how we compete. It's how we socialize. We're all gamers. We are. We mean all the gaming on electronic devices. So I submit, just if I look at just phones and consoles and PCs, that represents about 1/4 of the population that are playing on those devices. With the other of us playing on other things, we're playing other things. And so when we start thinking about why that is, why it's grown so much, is because of the interactive, immersive, and social kind of behaviors that we experience when we are gaming. It's not the same thing as watching a movie, passively consuming something. This is about the interactivity elements, and I think interactivity and immersive elements and the way we connect to other people through computing is where the future of computing has always been, and it's where it's going. That's why I don't, to Neil's point, I don't see any end in sight. The more we produce in terms of our capabilities, the more creativity is unleashed, the more we start applying it to commercial aspects, to B2B aspects, B2C aspects, and of course entertainment and gaming. I would just say some of these things are at the front of pushing the envelope. They become ubiquitous in other segments. It's also exploding from a business perspective. Not just the number of people in it, but business opportunities. There's been a terrific proliferation of pro esports teams across probably every geo. And there's a lot of, why would I say that's important is because when those teams play and they play at sporting events, there's huge amounts of infrastructure that have to be put in place to go deliver that. And that's because it's highly interactive and immersive and amazingly social, the types of people that it connects to. You're getting a glimpse of where the world is heading with all the other types of segments and use cases besides gaming that are going to be leaning on that. But the proliferation of teams, there's huge implications behind that in terms of content, audience, and infrastructure. On the new esports leagues and media rights deals, so it's not just about people playing games anymore, or even the audience anymore. People are selling media rights to these capabilities. They're tuning in on a broadcast. They're thinking about ways to distribute these kind of experiences on Netflix. And certainly Twitch and YouTube have taken off really big, but it comes with media rights. Used to be, think about this from a real sports perspective. Those media rights are tightly owned by the sports leagues. The sports leagues, in this case, don't own the content. So there's a lot of similarities. So there are different types of deals and business opportunities springing up because of that. And then bigger partnerships with established brands. I was at Intel Extreme Masters in Katowice, and I saw a booth. You would think it would be a gaming booth, or something around PCs or notebooks. It was the Gillette Razor booth at an Intel Extreme Masters event. Because what these brands are saying is they want to be relevant to what's important to people today, and clearly gaming has been important for a long time, and it's broken out into mainstream space with leagues and advertisers and pro sports teams, so they want to be relevant to that audience. So they were doing like, they were printing up Gillette razors on site. It's okay, I like swag as anybody else who went and picked up one. But what I noticed, and I talked to them later in the booth, is, so these are all like guy razor things, right? I mean, where are the women's razors? I mean, women shave their legs, and I feel like you're ignoring a huge part of your audience here. They're like, oh, geez, like, what were you thinking? I say, what were you thinking? And you'll hear me talk a little bit later when I talk about audience and where future compute is going. Diversity is going to be an amazing thing to address that kind of audience. And then, of course, viewership. And this is the one I think is one of the unsung heroes of what's going on in the future of compute is the viewership. We keep thinking about the people that play the game, think about the sponsors and teams. The viewership is astounding, and I'll get to that in a little bit, why I think that's an important thing to pay attention to and not ignore. Now I'm going to try to categorize the future into roughly 3 buckets. It is in the context of gaming, but like I said, I think it applies broadly across a few segments. So in the case of gaming and esports, one of the key trends is basically about more immersive experiences. You're trying to suspend disbelief, or believe at least you're somewhere that you are not, in an experience that you can own and share and interact with. The second thing I'll be talking about would be the transformation of some of the business models I brought up earlier. And the third element, and this by and large is my favorite because I think it's the most underserved, but has the biggest potential, is there's new forms of audience engagement that are popping up, and we can't ignore those. So let me talk a little bit about immersive experiences in a couple of contexts. I'll be talking about, in this particular case, infinite worlds, and then some of the human-machine interface angles on this. So when I think about infinite worlds, it comes down to 2 things for me. The size of the environments that we want to operate in. You can think procedurally generated environments. You can think of volumetric captured environments. Or you can think of environments in the context of another important phenomenon is the democratization of content creation, including gaming. And what I mean by that is, no matter what you can apply in terms of a developer as a resource to go develop a game or environment or an experience, you're still limited by the resources you're able to go hire and retain on staff and monetize. And the fact that you can actually start democratizing content, start creating your own content, and in this case, games. I'll use the example Sansar. Any of you familiar with Sansar? So they help create virtual reality world environments, and they have people that can construct rooms and trees and lakes and anything you can think of. They can create for a VR space, even spaces that can be monetized. So people contribute to this space. They develop content. Some people actually monetize what they do there. The way you tie that to infinite worlds is, given that there's a limited amount of resources, and I won't be able to quote Andrew Wilson verbatim, but Andrew Wilson, who's owns his CTO or CEO of EA Sports, also sits on Intel's board. He basically said, I can hire people, but you have to be able to expand beyond that. We're not going to be limited anymore because compute's just literally everywhere, right? Whether it's cloud, edge, or in clients in front of you. Compute's everywhere, and giving people the tools to enhance the experiences we start them out with is going to be very important, because they want to customize those experiences based on what they want to do with their friends and their environments. So these infinite worlds, bringing that seamlessly to life is, above the combination of the amount of infrastructure that's getting laid out, the types of tools that are getting laid out, the developers kicking off, some pretty amazing things, and then being able to democratize that content for anybody who wants to go contribute to that. It does apply to more than just gaming. It applies to all types of content, both commercial and consumer content. So that's one area where I see the future of compute going. It's not all hardware. A lot of what's happening with the future of computing is getting unleashed through software and services spiral that, again, helps us enhance the hardware and the technology side. The second one is more around the human-machine interface interactions, and it's, I apologize because I only have a VR headset on here, but it's way, way, way more than VR. Think about this in the context of things like eye tracking and control, or voice control and interaction, or different types of haptics that you wear or can experience to enhance that human-machine interface. There's a lot of things going on here that are drawing us closer and closer, not only to compute, but to each other through compute. And people want more realistic ways of interacting with that. Whether I'm sitting next to somebody, virtually sitting next to someone at a sporting event, and I want to go tap them on the shoulder and get their attention. You want to be able to go do that. How do you go do that and get somebody's attention? If I want to go through a training exercise where I want some actual feedback, tactile feedback, when I know I've either reached too far into an environment or not far enough in an environment, you need some feedback besides just visual clues. When I want to, I'll use gaming example, when I want to interact with people on the other side of the world and they do not happen to speak English for some reason. I hope it's not English, I don't understand that, but I hear other people speak languages. You want the ability to connect with them in ways that are really natural. Do we do speech to text? Well, that's boring, it's text, it's better than nothing. Or we do speech to speech translations. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to connect with the person at the other side that you're gaming against or you're gaming with. They might actually be a partner on your team. So those are the things I talk about when we're thinking about human-machine interface that are way beyond just AR and VR. I think AR and VR are going to push the envelope of what's possible. I think that's what's coming, but that's not all there is. I would also submit that even flat screens are a form of interactivity. So if VR headsets are not prevalent enough, but you can still have an interesting look around immersive experience on a flat screen. And I'll talk a little bit about that later when I talk about Intel Sports. So the next one is transforming business models. One is, I would call it cloud gaming. You might be tempted to think about cloud gaming as a technology. It's actually a business model transformation. What I would submit is every form of entertainment, and I consider gaming a form of entertainment, and or content. And content could be anything. It could be music, books, videos. It could be design content through a collaboration using Adobe, for example. But in this case, cloud gaming is a business model transformation. What they're trying to do with cloud gaming is use the efficiency and the distribution mechanisms of cloud to attract a larger audience, which is a business model. How do I address a larger TAM beyond the people that game on phones or the performance people who go game on PCs? How can I deliver that in a better, more compelling way? How do I see that transforming those workloads, and how do I see that transforming compute? So I'll give you an example. I'll take in the context of cloud gaming. I think when we deliver cloud gaming to phones, and there are some companies already delivering that pretty easily, all it is graphics in the cloud, compressing a frame and sending it to an endpoint for consumption. And I think that works really well if mostly the game at the other end is light on the interactivity piece. So if it's a phone and you're interacting with touch. But now you take that to a notebook or a PC where it's important to have keyboard mice interactions because, first of all, they're a lot faster. Those types of interactions and back and forth are a lot faster, but that's where the games are being developed right now, and that's a level of immersiveness and interaction you want to get to. How does cloud and that entire chain, cloud, edge, the 5G networks that will eventually be deployed, I promise they will get there, and the devices, how do you deal with round-trip latency? How do you deal with these infinite worlds in that kind of environment? And I would submit, you can't do it easily now, but you can't ignore the fact that everything is becoming focused on cloud. Even gaming today is cloud enabled. If I'm playing on a PC, but I'm streaming the event over Twitch, that's cloud enabled. Or I'm matchmaking to different people on the other side of the world, it's cloud enabled. In this context, cloud gaming, or call it edge gaming, would be where most of the compute and rendering is run to some endpoint, to a variety of endpoints. We're seeing a lot of potential there because we're learning a lot through cloud-enabled type workloads, but cloud gaming, it's been slowly marching up from very simple experiences on phones to more complex and highly interactive experiences on PCs and notebooks. And we believe that through a coordinated effort between cloud and edge and client computing, including rendering, storage, and I/O, that being able to manage those workloads will produce the best experiences. So we're asking ourselves questions like, what kind of game can I design that I wasn't able to design before? Not how do I take my existing game and run it in the cloud, that's oversimplistic. Once I have all of this capability accessible to me as a developer in a way that makes it easy for me to program and get access to, what would I develop that I never developed before, including commercial and gaming type applications? And that's another amazing transformation on the business model side that's going to be unleashed on the technology side. The other piece of this is sort of the convergence of a lot of things. Most of the convergence is what's going on with real sports and actually esports. So from a traditional gaming perspective, we think, what the hell does the NFL have to do with esports at all? And we're actually connected to them in a couple of ways. One is through the Intel Sports Group, where we do volumetric capture on like an NFL game and give the ability to have someone on any compute device be able to pick their point of view and replay that from any angle they want, including over through VR. It could be a flat experience, it also could be a VR experience. The other way of thinking about convergence here is that some of the sports players are actually becoming gamers. Was it Juju Smith-Schuster, Pittsburgh Steelers player, is that right? We got the team right? Yep. I think he was just playing Fortnite, yep. And there were 600,000 people watching the guy play. It's like, I mean, he's good. He's not great, but sports and esports, again, you're trying to become relevant to your audience. A lot of these sports players are actually pretty young. They are the millennials that play a ton of games, and they find these ways to connect to the audience. I think we're seeing other areas like people who do musicians, for example, connecting to people in sports, esports. Because I don't know if you notice this, without sound, esports is not as exciting. And I don't mean just the sounds based on the gameplay, but music's become a really important role as part of the esports gameplay, and they want to connect to their audience in authentic ways. The other business model is getting transformed by what we're starting to unleash on the technology side is what we're doing with the Olympics. So we did bring Intel True VR to the Olympics, but we also brought esports to the Olympics for the very first time in Pyeongchang in South Korea. This was with StarCraft 2 as an esports sort of tournament that we're showing during the Olympics. No, it's not an Olympics medal event. I wouldn't rule out the opportunity for this to actually become a medal event, but it's a very different business model, right? Because the people that deliver, in this case, StarCraft, Blizzard, that sport, that title's actually owned by them, where the sports in the Olympics, football's not owned by someone, right? So it's a different way of the Olympics thinking about this. And what they were looking for is a different way to go touch their audience, to make the Olympics also more relevant to a large growing audience of millennials and younger people, and also inspire them to, some sort of, pride in their country. And that's exactly what they found out through that kind of tournament play. So we're helping transform even the Olympics. You may not think of the Olympics as a business model, but the IOC certainly does. How do you transform that business to be more inclusive of a wide range of audiences by associating esports to what's going on in the Olympic sports? And then on top of all that, esports is actually copying what's going on from the real sports side of things. Franchise leagues are getting set up everywhere. It's an amazing business. It's the way to kind of scale your business. Own the experience, but scale it in ways that provide access to a larger audience and a larger set of gamers. Let me talk a little bit now about this new audience engagement model. This is my favorite. So let's see if I can give you a stat here. And this wasn't the biggest one. So at Intel Extreme Masters in Katowice, Poland, we had over the 2 tournament days, we had roughly 200,000 people physically show up. You said, well, is that a lot of people, Frank, in today's day and age? I don't know. I guess the Super Bowl only had like 114,000 people show up. So it feels bigger than the Super Bowl, if you think the Super Bowl's big. But that's still not what I mean by a large audience. When we were streaming this online, there were 46 million people watching the tournament, which is over those 2 days. Think about that size of a freaking audience. You can't fit 42 million people inside a stadium. It ain't gonna happen. And they're not all gonna travel to Katowice. But they were all online watching what was going on here because it's become a form of entertainment. Gaming as an entertainment is a very important thing. Matter of fact, it's important to broadcasters. It's gonna be a struggle for the broadcasters to figure it out because people don't go to TVs to watch esports. They go to their devices. They're gonna go to a phone or maybe even view it through a console, certainly a PC or a notebook. But our ability to go entertain is really important. And then the social aspects are amazing. I talk about the 46 million people online. Going on are all these side chats where influencers speaking to each other, the people are kind of organizing themselves. I'm sure Discord was lit up. Everybody's lighting up and trying to share and give it a point of view about what's going on in the socialization aspects. And then the last part to me, which is more of a technology angle about where the future of computing is going, is the interactivity, these new audience engagement models. So think of it this way: if I could give the audience the ability to become a non-player character in a game, because I want to go mess around with the players. Right? I'm not playing a game. I'm not going to have to go compete with these guys, but I want to mess around with them. The way someone shooting a free throw where the audience and backing stuff, those big figures wave around. I don't even know if that works, but people love to think that they can go impact the outcome of a shot. Think of it when the audience actually becomes a part of the gameplay. They don't compete, but they disrupt or they interact. I think there's another example where I might want to reward certain teams for doing certain things. I might want to give them a few more points or a few more goodies or a few more attack modes. There's ways for the audience to engage that they want to do that just have to be built in, and there's already some experiments going on with that. There are some technology implications that we have to pay attention to. Think about what we're doing with True View VR, which we give the audience the ability to look anywhere inside the stadium during an NFL game. I can be on the floor real time with them. Well, I don't have to lay out a bunch of cameras to go do that from an esports perspective. I've already got the volumetric capture. Now I can let the audience control the way they view the esports from anywhere inside of there. That requires a terrific load both on that cloud infrastructure as well as the networks that have to deliver that in real time. It's not because people don't want to do this, it's just because technology is the limit. So sometimes the future computing has to catch up to people's aspirations. And I would submit once you get there, they're gonna want even more. So now think about how you apply artificial intelligence to watch the gameplay and make recommendations to tell the audience where they might want to go look because they know an attack's going to happen. And I don't know if you guys have played PUBG or Fortnite, but you can never tell where that shot's coming from. You might need ways of AI informing you saying, that guy in the hill over keeps pointing at you, you might want to pay attention. They can't change your gameplay, but you can get a better heads up because of the way AI engines can go interpret gameplay and what's going on. For me, the audience is more important than anything, because if you can deliver that kind of experience to the audience, I'm thinking about the advancements we have to make in technology, both in cloud and edge, and even on the PC side. It means the audience members aren't going to live with a low-end PC anymore. They're going to want the best experience they can get, which helps drive performance needs, which is certainly good for my business. And then the last part I want to talk about the audience side is more about what's going on in diversity. At Katowice, Poland, again, in the championship, this was the 4th time we've had women's compete in tournaments in CSGO. Diversity and inclusion is really important to us as we touch more and more people through these types of highly interactive and immersive environments. We participate in Aniki. We sponsor teams during these types of events. We're part of the Fair Play Alliance, and it's because the way you reach people is going to be global in nature. For some reason, not everybody is the same. But everybody needs to be the same. I think that's part of what makes these kind of social interactions very interesting. I will say this though, what comes with these kind of capabilities are, compute capabilities and future technology capabilities that we have to go address things like anti-toxicity, right? We want to make these environments inviting for the people that want to be invited. That doesn't mean there's not a part of the gameplay that's going to be the Wild West. I think people can go join that, but when you want to, hey, I'm just here to play the game. That's what you want to do. You don't want to get into a bunch of weird social discourse about politics or my religion or the type of color or race I am. That has no importance in the context of the game. We want to also create the ability for tools like that in computing to go look at that. And here enters things like, well, how do I do that, Frank? How do we use things like speech sampling and artificial intelligence to go create some meaning out of that? I can't tell you what the consequence is for recognizing toxic behavior, but I think if we can recognize it and point it out to the users in the community, they can make decisions to go manage that themselves. So you see how the future computing is very far-reaching business models, infrastructure, and putting it hands into the end user. So I'm going to wrap it up. Am I good on time here? All right. Wrap it up a little bit on the technology side. So what I've been verbalizing today, I try to put down in a diagram for you. All of the technologies are fueling these kind of immersive interactive behaviors. All of this data demanding performance. It doesn't mean everything in that chain is going to be the highest performance capability, but it means performance has got to be recognized by the people using it. It's got to be very responsive. I don't want any lagginess. I don't want any delays. I want true real-time interactivity. And to do that, I would submit there's a set of technologies that we need to bring to bear here. It's very easy to say, hey, any one of these components looks interesting, and they are interesting, but they're more interesting because they're getting applied to solve much, much bigger problems than they ever did before. I could have afforded just to play, let's just say, I'm on a PC, I bought my graphics card, I got my CPU and I play the game. Yeah, if I'm playing by myself, I'm not connected, I don't want to socialize, I don't want to stream, I don't want to do anything else. Think about what's happening in there and in also collaborative environments that involve commercial aspects. you have to bring these elements to bear. We can't afford to just focus on one thing because one of these other things becomes a bottleneck to that experience. So to that end, within a PC platform or within a cloud platform, we do advance all of these capabilities on the left-hand side. But now I'm thinking about this as really a distributed model. And this is where sort of the future vision kind of comes into play. If you think about what's happening in cloud, or what's happened in cloud, the efficiencies being generated by cloud and delivery mechanisms, what's had to happen is compute. And when I say compute, I mean a broad set of compute capabilities like compute and graphics and storage, to oversimplify it, have become disaggregated. They need to live and be able to be used in combinations of ways to serve a particular workload. What's also happened is on the software side, software is becoming more modularized, disaggregated, because I need things to run on those compute places and in certain areas to produce the best experience. And what I'm seeing is the cloud is very quickly marching towards the edge. And when I say edge, because I think there's like 8 different edges between the cloud and the device, I mean the central office edge, where the telcos have now already started transforming their telco equipment into basically cloud-type infrastructure. So the cloud will be marching towards the edge. It'll go through 5G networks, and now as it's starting to touch on-premise devices, whether it's a router or even PCs or devices behind those routers, that cloud infrastructure is going to have to be modified so it can manage disaggregated elements of compute, distributed compute models and workloads. That's the future that's coming. Right? That infrastructure is a very compelling infrastructure, and there's a lot of interesting technology opportunities, use case opportunities, and new business challenges are going to result from that. That's why I'm personally interested in where the future of compute's going. And we have to do that in an amazing amount of partnerships. I might build silicon across every bit of platforms that I've talked about today, but you can't do that without involving the entire value chain of the ecosystem. This is why we lean in so heavily on the hardware side with OEMs and people that actually consume our hardware, on the content side, whether it's the engines or the ISVs, or the tool chains that we have, or through mechanisms for distribution, because when we talk to distributors and how things get distributed to that type of infrastructure, we learn things that enhance what we're doing in the computing side. And then I already talked about how the leads are going to be demanding and putting pressure on that technology in the future compute as well as business models. So I've shown you a lot of images. I think you've heard the story that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I probably had more than 1,000 words today. But if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video must be worth 1,000 opportunities. So I'm going to wrap up with a video. Can't help it. I'm an Intel guy. I love that. But think about the experiences, right? Certainly I'm going to anchor on what Intel delivers as being core to those experiences, but it's those experiences that matter. And it's the entire ecosystem and value chain that delivers to those kind of capabilities that bring those things to light, right? Including our worthy competitor, AMD. So thanks for letting me have that chat with you. Appreciate being able to share that.